This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, January 7th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, after a shocking day of violence on Capitol Hill, Congress moves ahead to certify Biden's victory in the presidential election. And the president promises an orderly transition of power. Democrats will now have control of the Senate after victories in both Senate runoff races in Georgia. It's a new era for Israel and the African nation of Sudan after the U.S. signs an agreement that paves the way for the African nation to normalize relations with the Jewish state. And are we getting close to the end times? And if so, what does that mean for you? We're going to hear how one best-selling author answers those questions. All of those stories are ahead in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with President Trump promising an orderly transition of power on Inauguration Day after a mob overwhelmed police at the U.S. Capitol Wednesday, storming the building and forcing lawmakers to evacuate. The scenes of violence shocked Americans and world leaders and prompted condemnations from a host of faith leaders. Heather Sells brings us the story.
Trump supporters marched to the Capitol after the president addressed the rally, some of them turning violent, breaching the barricades and moving quickly into the Capitol building Wednesday afternoon. This video shows them simply overwhelming one officer on the first floor and making their way up to the Senate chamber where Vice President Pence was presiding over Electoral College proceedings. Pictures show guards with guns drawn, crouching behind barriers to keep the intruders out of the legislative chambers. Lawmakers took cover on the floor and were told to put on gas masks.
We were just told that there has been tear gas in the rotunda, and we're being instructed to each of us get gas masks that are under our seats.
In a moment that was unprecedented and unimaginable for many Americans, Capitol Police were forced to evacuate the vice president and members of the House and Senate. The lawmakers quickly made their way out to secure locations while the mob took over, posing in ludicrous shots in the Senate. Outside the Capitol, the protesters waved Trump flags and a big Jesus flag. They literally climbed up the walls, tore down metal barricades at the bottom of the Capitol steps, and forced police to back up on the steps, eventually taking over. Democrats and many Republicans blamed the president for the violence.
There's no question that the president formed the mob, the president incited the mob.
At a midday rally for his supporters right before they marched to the Capitol, the president denounced the election and called on them to continue their protest at the Capitol.
You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
In the late afternoon, President-elect Biden called out the mob for an insurrection bordering on sedition and told the president to stop them.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
Shortly after, Trump released a video on Twitter where he told the mob to go home, but also praised them and condemned the election.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
Twitter later pulled the video and locked down the president's account, citing its civic integrity policy. A long list of faith leaders also called out the mob, including Trump faith advisor Robert Jeffress.
Disobeying and assaulting police is a sin, whether it's done by Antifa or by angry Republicans.
One protester was killed after authorities shot her inside the Capitol during the chaos. 3 others died from medical emergencies. Eventually, the National Guard arrived and used tear gas and percussion grenades to clear the Capitol. By nightfall, the crowds had largely dispersed. This morning on Twitter, via an aide, the president promised a, quote, orderly transition on January 20th. This after lawmakers returned last night to finish the task they started, certifying Joe Biden's win in the Electoral College. Heather Sells, CBN News.
And as you just heard, despite one of the most tumultuous days in the history of the U.S. Capitol, lawmakers worked into the early morning hours today to count each state's electoral votes and certify Joe Biden's victory. After the Capitol was cleared, leaders announced they'd gather again in the evening to finish the job.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win.
We will not bow to lawlessness or intimidation.
Several lawmakers withdrew their objections to the certification of Biden's victory. Not all lawmakers, though, dropped their objections, so the debate continued into the early morning hours before the votes were certified just before 4 o'clock this morning. Democrats will now control the Senate along with the House under a Biden administration after Democratic challenger Jon Ossoff has been declared the winner in his runoff election in Georgia against Republican incumbent David Perdue. Ossoff had already thanked the people for voting to make him one of their senators.
This campaign has been about health and jobs and justice for the people of this state, for all the people of this state. And they will be my guiding principles as I serve this state in the U.S. Senate.
Ossoff will join his fellow Democratic challenger, Raphael Warnock, who also won his runoff race. Their victories mean the Senate is now tied 50-50, meaning Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will have the tie-breaking vote, and Democrats will effectively be in charge of the U.S. Senate. Coming up, the way has been cleared for Israel to reach another major agreement under the peace deals known as the Abraham Accords, this time with the African nation of Sudan. We're going to bring you the story and get the latest from Jerusalem when we come back.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Stand by.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
Sudan has signed an agreement with the United States that paves the way for the African nation to normalize relations with Israel. It is the latest step in the peace deals known as the Abraham Accords begun by the Trump administration. Those agreements have seen 3 other countries in the Middle East normalize relations or open up diplomatic channels with Israel. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said at the signing in Khartoum Wednesday that the latest deal means a new era for both Sudan and Israel.
It's a great honor to be here with you today, and I think we'll have a tremendous impact on the people of Israel and the people of Sudan as they continue to work together on cultural and economic opportunities.
Mnuchin also signed a memorandum of understanding to help pay Sudan's debt to the World Bank. Last month, the U.S. removed Sudan from the list of state sponsors of terror. Both moves will help rehabilitate Sudan, which was once considered a pariah nation. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us now from Jerusalem with more on this development. So, Chris, how dramatic a change does this represent for Sudan?
Well, Ephraim, it's a huge transition. If you take a look back in 1989, that was Sudan was overthrown by an Islamic dictatorship by a man named al-Bashir. He was overthrown last year. Well, I should say July of 2019. The transformation so far has been dramatic. If you realize that Sudan was one time a base for Osama bin Laden, it was also a stop-off point for Iranian weapons to the Gaza Strip. But since July of 2019, it's been led by a joint civilian and military government. And now, instead of looking to either al-Qaeda or Iran, they're looking to Washington and the West. And so it's a dramatic transformation. Also, they were a great persecutor of Christians for many decades under al-Bashir. And they're looking to the West. And actually, the money that they've talked about yesterday, not only for the World Bank, but also forgiving some of the debt and also taking Sudan off to the state sponsor of terrorist states, really has been a transformation. And this is one more step. I mean, it's hard to believe, Ephraim, 5 years ago, if you would have said Sudan was going to have normalization with relations with Israel, many people wouldn't believe it.
So how are Israelis reacting to the Abraham Accords since they began?
Well, the Israelis that I talked to love it. In fact, when things opened up between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, thousands of Israelis were on flights, daily flights. In fact, they had to put 2 flights a day to go to the UAE or Bahrain. They appreciate the tourism, the fact that they can now go freely to these countries. They're even making it, visa as free to Israelis going there. They also see it as a great opportunity for trade. One example is Our Crowd, which is one of the premier entrepreneur startups here that fund startups, is really robust in their relations with the UAE and Bahrain. So they see it in many ways. They also see it, Ephraim, as not just a cold peace like Egypt and Jordan for decades, but they see it as a warm peace. One example of that is an Emirati and Bahraini delegation coming here to help light the candles in Hanukkah last month. Just one sign of a really warm relationship. Right now, it's a bit on hold because of COVID. People aren't coming and going quite like they did a few weeks ago. But when things open up, I think a lot of Israelis are quite excited about the opportunities for tourism and especially for trade.
Now, Chris, of course, these developments have happened under the Trump administration, so it begs the question, how do you think the Biden administration will deal with the Abraham Accords?
Well, we've already investigated that, reported on that, Ephraim. For example, we talked to former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, who feels like, they won't really put a premium or a priority on the Abraham Accords as opposed to the Trump administration. It remains to be seen, even if they have a vision for this kind of new paradigm here in the Middle East. It's likely, Ephraim, I think they'll go back to the whole paradigm of solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict before reaching out to the other nations. The Abraham Accords put that paradigm on its head. For example, former Secretary of State John Kerry said, you really are not going to see peace with any of these nations until you solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The last several months of what the Trump administration does has really proved that to be incorrect. And one other thing I'd add, Ephraim, would be the whole idea of what the Biden administration is going to do with Iran. I mean, part of the factor, a major factor of the Abraham Accords is the fact that these Sunni Gulf nations see Iran as a common enemy with Israel. And right now, with an incoming Biden administration, I think many of these countries, including Israel, see the possibility that the Biden administration may try to renegotiate the Iranian nuclear deal, what they all saw as maybe a mortal danger, and paving the way for Iran to get nuclear weapons. So those two things are going to have to be closely watched as time goes on and the Biden administration takes over the foreign policy of the United States and what impact it's going to have here in the Middle East and to Israel.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your time. Still ahead, are we really living in or at least approaching the end times? No one knows for sure, but if we are, how would it affect you and your life? We're going to take a look at those questions right after this.
If you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Are we truly living in or at least approaching the end times? A Lifeway survey conducted last year found 9 in 10 pastors believe at least some current events match what Jesus said would occur shortly before he returns to earth. So if true, what does that mean for you? On this week's episode of The Global Lane, author Troy Anderson shares some of the signs of the times and why he believes the return of Jesus is drawing closer.
I've done over 200 interviews with, major faith leaders and experts in many fields. But Billy Graham told me signs of the end of the age are converging for the first time since Jesus made those predictions. And then just a host of faith leaders said the same thing. But then experts at existential risk institutes at Oxford and Harvard and MIT, that they say that there's great dangers. Nuclear war, of course, artificial intelligence, even a global totalitarian government. So there's many signs that we're moving into these what Jesus and the prophets said would happen in the last days.
Troy, I've traveled around the world and I've met many persecuted Christians. In some countries, the suffering is extensive, it's overwhelming. Nothing compares to that right here in the U.S., but we are seeing some troubling developments now with churches being shut down during the pandemic, also church shootings. So what do you anticipate will happen in the days ahead to Christians and other people of faith right here in the United States?
Yeah, I think this COVID-19 pandemic has been a big wake-up call for the church here in America. Some churches have closed, and now we're watching sort of loss of freedoms, the rollout of this great reset that the elite are talking about, and even certain levels of oppression and persecution going on. So the Bible told us that this kind of thing would happen as we move into the end times, and we're now beginning to experience a slight amount of what the terrible persecution that's been going on around the world for many years now.
You think it's going to get worse? We're going to see Christians jailed and persecuted?
Well, I mean, just the other day, a lawmaker in New York proposed a bill to have detention camps for people with, I guess, with COVID. So that was a pretty stunning development. Only time will tell if that actually go forward. But there's certainly, many signs that we need to get ready for this. The church needs to wake up, and that's why we wrote this book.
It's just scary to think that those things are actually being proposed, whether they're even approved or not. We're on the way. In your book, you talk about knowing your enemy and being battle ready for the end times. Now, C.S. Lewis is quoted, and he describes the world as enemy territory. You mentioned that we have at least 3 enemies. Now, you're not talking politics and socialism here. Briefly tell us what are they?
Yeah, the Bible tells us we're in a great spiritual battle. And so most of this book is designed to teach you how to become a warrior of God, to fight this spiritual battle. The Bible tells us to put on the full armor of God, the sword of the Spirit, all those different things. And the Bible even talks about the angels being organized in a military structure. I was just reading 1 Chronicles the other day. It said that, describes God as the Lord God of armies. There's all these battles described in the Bible. So this book is actually designed to take you through what the military calls the making of a warrior process, and it will help you mature in your faith and do the Lord's work, which is primarily spreading the gospel and being engaged in this great spiritual battle that's going on behind the scenes.
And you talk about sin, you talk about the flesh, and also Satan, real spiritual battles here. So from reading your book, it seems to me you and your co-author suggest the modern-day church, at least in America, lacks a center of gravity, a true understanding of the faith, discipline, courage needed to counter what is coming. So why is that, Troy, and how should we respond?
Yeah, so my co-author, retired U.S. Army chaplain and Colonel David Giammona, spent 3 decades in the military. And so in this book, he takes things he learned in the military, relates those to spiritual warfare, and becoming the soldiers of Christ that God has called us to be. So this book has many different things about military tactics, spiritual warfare tactics. I sort of went through the process of this whole thing that he lays out in this book, and I believe that I've come to grow in my faith. It's also designed to help us walk in the supernatural power, protection, and provision of the Holy Spirit as we move into the end times, which is going to be crucial for as we move into these days ahead.
And you mentioned many steps that we must take to be salt and light in the world, to prepare for the approaching hardship and suffering. You talk about emergency preparedness. Those of us living in hurricane zones, of course, know the importance of surviving without running water and electricity and being ready for that. So what are the most important things for us to do spiritually and physically?
Yeah, so most of the book is concentrated on spiritual things. Of course, prayer is the most powerful thing in the universe. Reading your Bible, fellowshipping, discovering the gifts of the Spirit the Lord has given you, different abilities and those kind of things. And then we actually have a chapter called Prepping for the End Times, where the colonel lays out, the practical, prudent kind of things you need to do to be prepared for any kind of disaster. Here in California, we could have the San Andreas go off. Of course, there's superstorms around the country, and there's a recent report out said that we're experiencing record numbers of natural disasters of extreme character in recent years. So it seems like all these things that Jesus and the prophets told us would happen, we're now witnessing these things in real time.
Okay, the book is The Military Guide to Armageddon, Battle-Tested Strategies to Prepare Your Life and Soul for the End Times. Troy Anderson, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Global Lane, a look at the battle over free speech and more on the international campaign known as the Great Reset that critics say is a worldwide socialist movement at the highest levels. You can see those stories and more on the Global Lane this evening at 8:30 Eastern, and of course you can find that on the CBN News Channel. Coming up, another sign of the times, a quick and easy way for some college students to get a COVID test from a vending machine. We're going to show you when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, And this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Welcome back. We've all been there. You get a little hungry, you head to the vending machine, pop in some money or swipe your card, and a snack conveniently comes right to you. Well, now that same convenience has made its way to the fight against the coronavirus. The University of California, San Diego has installed vending machines filled with do-it-yourself COVID tests. Students there are required to take a test once a week, so now they can do so. Just head to one of the campus vending machines and grab a free self-administered test kit. After a quick swab, they leave their kit in a drop box and wait for the results to return within about 2 days. Many students say they like the vending machines because they're convenient, quick, and easy. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I hope you will join me in this prayer of gratitude even in the face of difficult times. Father, I thank you that you are most concerned about kingdom building, and there is no earthly chaos that can stand in the way of your kingdom. Amen. With that prayer, it is time for believers to get busy helping to build his kingdom. And I hope you'll make today a thankful Thursday indeed. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here next time. Bye-bye, everybody.